Well, good morning. How good is it to look out into a room full of real people? Well, yeah, much better than a screen full of squares in a video conference, eh? Well, might just turn this down. Bit too loud? Too loud, okay? Good? All right. Cool. My name's Justin Lanigan. I'm the Managing Director at Lavabox, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to building a resilient sales team in a post-Covid-19 New Zealand. Now, can I just start by getting a quick show of hands if I can? This is the only time I'll do this, but just in brief, how many of you have found this year more challenging than average so far? All right, now, hold on, I'm not done yet. Keep your hands up if you would say that that would be an understatement. Yeah, me too, I'm with you. Well, no doubt this year New Zealand businesses are experiencing some pretty unique and unprecedented challenges. And, I mean, geez, when you look at all of it, it's like supply chains have been disrupted. You know, offshore talent pools are off limits. Many of our projects have been put on hold. And of course, many good people have lost their jobs. But even further, the whole situation that we're in right now is quite tenuous. You know, it seems like all it could take for the wheels to fall off this situation is an isolation patient breaking out for a misguided trip to their local countdown. And, you know, I think what we would all agree on, though, is that as challenging as 2020 has been so far, we are lucky by global standards. And we're lucky not just for the opportunities that New Zealand has always afforded us, but we're lucky because of the unique global situation that we find ourselves in. I mean, as I stand here today, our kids can all go off to school. Thank goodness for parents in the room. You know, we've also we're able to get out on the road and visit our colleagues and our customers. We're able to get together even just on a morning like this. And so I think we can all say that, you know, we're really quite lucky to be in New Zealand as it stands right now. And, you know, there's an old adage that in an economy, nothing happens until somebody sells something. And New Zealand's sales leaders have an important role to play in New Zealand's economic recovery and in our future, and you are being called on to step up. You're being called on to find new levels of resilience, and it's resilience across every facet of your organization. You're being asked to keep your emotions in check and to maintain your presence and your focus at a time when pressure and uncertainty are running high, and then you're being asked to empower your teams to do the same. You're being asked to adopt new technology, to find new ways of working. You're being asked to get creative, to get your deals across the line in ways you probably never would have done before. And all in all, what we can be sure of is that what we need to succeed in this new environment is very broad. It's not just about technology or business process. It's not just about sales and marketing alignment. And it's not just about business process automation. And those are Lavabox's areas of expertise. So what we wanted to do today was to really widen that lens. And it really starts with the culture that you create as a sales leader. It's maintaining that presence and focus under pressure and empowering your people to do the same. And to speak to that this morning, we're lucky enough to have Dr. Sven Hansen, who's going to be speaking to us about how to build a resilient culture. And of course, in times like this, we also look to our peers for guidance and for inspiration. And for that reason, we've also got Mike Stokes from Indicator along, who have conducted some fascinating research on New Zealand sales leaders post-COVID-19 called Mood of the Sales Leader. Now, technology has always played an important role in helping forward-thinking businesses to adapt and to thrive. And of course, as we all went into lockdown, businesses that had invested in robust technology, cloud-based applications, and integrated their systems were in a far better position than those that were stuck on legacy, on-premise applications and disconnected tools. But I think we'd all agree that the flexible and the work from anywhere sales team is not a trend that's likely to go away anytime soon. And we believe that's something to be embraced. But at the same time, technology will play an important role in helping those businesses to make this transition. And so for that reason, we have invited along Kelly Sykes from Salesforce, one of our partners, and also her colleague Ben Sheehan. So Kelly is going to be speaking about enabling the work from anywhere sales team and giving us a demo of many of the new innovations that Salesforce has brought to market to help your business to thrive in this new environment. And of course, with new ways of working come new ways of empowering and to motivate our teams. And so we've also got Ben Sheehan speaking to building Ben. We've got Ben speaking to leading into the new normal, so principles of resilient sales management. Now, as the dust settles and we begin to navigate this new environment, I think it's clear that every new business, every one of our customers has been impacted differently. At Lavabox, as I'm sure as many of you do, we work with a diverse range of customers across a broad range of industries. And what became clear to us early on when the pandemic hit is that not all customers were impacted the same, and that broad-based industry assumptions around how people were affected was just not going to cut it. We had to really work to learn about how each of our clients were affected and also what they needed from us to support them, even if that was nothing at all for the time being. And as part of our journey to understand how our customers were affected, we really worked through a lot of interesting conversations, challenging conversations with many key clients. And one thing that really stood out in my conversations with customers was that with Greg Arnold. And Greg is really just a fantastic Lavabox and Salesforce customer who is the general manager at Kitchenmania. And Kitchenmania has had a really interesting journey coming through this pandemic. And the investments they have made in Salesforce and their other cloud applications have not just helped them to get through the pandemic, but really to come out swinging on the other side. And we're going to be hearing from Greg about the lessons that they have learned through this experience, and lessons that I trust will really be quite applicable to many of your businesses as well. One thing I think we can all agree on is that customer relationships are now far more important than they've ever been. Our customers really matter to us in a very important way right now. And as a result of that, when we looked at how the situation played out, as I mentioned, many customers have been impacted differently. But each business was in the boat that they were in at the time. They had the customers they were in the industry that they were in, for better or worse. They had the team that they'd assembled. They had the disaster recovery plans they either had or they didn't have. And then they kind of had to just work with the situation as they found it. But at the same time, customers' expectations and customers' emotions have also been rapidly changing. And our salespeople are often the human face that we have in front of our customers that represent our brands. And so it's really important that we're using this opportunity to build deeper, more strategic and lasting relationships and connections with our customers. So today we're lucky enough to have Rob Lim, who is the CEO of Track DDB, along to share some of the fascinating research that they've done on New Zealand consumers right the way through this pandemic and beyond. So they're going to be connecting with customers in times of uncertainty. Now, during the final 20 minutes of this morning's session, we're going to have a fantastic panel lined up. So along with having Greg, Dr. Sven Hansen, and also having Robert Lim come back, we are also having Andrew Searden, who is the CEO of Fresh Perspective Sales, joining the panel. And Andrew has a wealth of experience in the corporate and the enterprise space. So he's going to be talking about how these larger organizations and sales teams are pivoting, how they're rethinking their sales coverage, and how they're building new sales capabilities. So in that session, I'd welcome you to, if you've got burning questions that come up throughout the morning, please feel free to direct any questions to a specific panel member or to the group as a whole. And I'm hopeful that that will give you guys some really good inspiration and insight as we go forward. Now, just before we kick things off with Dr. Sven Hansen, I would be remiss if I didn't say something about what we do at Lavabox. So Lavabox are a team of Salesforce CRM and marketing automation consultants. And we exist to do one thing, and that is to help our clients to scale with confidence. And we do that by helping to work alongside them to design and automate their business processes, to craft their customer journeys, and also to improve their employee experiences. And we do that with a mix of Salesforce CRM platform implementations, continuous improvement, marketing automation, and system integration. As you can see, we work with a wide variety of customers, both large and small, across a diverse range of industries. But I think the one thing that unites every Lavabox customer is their commitment to using technology to fuel their vision. They are all aspirational, and they're all committed to using technology to win on customer experience as they scale. Just in closing this initial talk, I just wanted to share one final thought with you. I don't know about you, but this whole COVID-19 experience has really made me reflect on a number of things in my life, both professionally and personally. And you guys may have had a similar, experience through that as well. And I think if you put the tragic health implications to one side, which of course, globally are, far worse than they are in New Zealand right now. But I think the legacy that COVID-19 will have on New Zealand is really going to be on each of us as individuals and on our community here as a whole. What did we value? How did we respond? How did we look out for each other? And what qualities did this experience invite us to develop within ourselves? I don't know about you, but I certainly hope that resilience is one of those qualities. So with that, I would like to just introduce our first speaker of the morning, Dr. Sven Hansen. So Dr. Sven Hansen is the founder of the Resilience Institute, a global team of professionals dedicated to helping organizations build resilience. They define, and I'll get this right, they define resilience as the learned ability to bounce, grow, connect, and flow. Through global research on resilience in organizations, they have demonstrated that resilience can be learned and can be secured. Sven started his career in sports medicine and set up the Resilience Institute in 2002. He's based in Auckland. Please welcome me Sven Hansen.
Loud enough, or better to have this? Looks like it's on. All right, how's that? Too much? All right, super. So we have 15 or so minutes and a little time for questions. I'm going to work in fours today because four is a magical biological number. Every time you can simplify things down to four things, you got a little cognitive advantage and it's much easier to teach. All right, so the four things today. What is resilience? In a way that you can take something practically back. All right, what is culture? How does it affect you, mostly here, as sales leaders? And four, how does it affect your team? So those are kind of four themes I'd like to start. And I'd like to involve you, maybe just greet the person next to you and spend no more than 2 minutes agreeing on what resilience is. So point number 1, what is resilience? For you, not Justin's view. Alrighty, thank you. And then really quickly, 1 minute for this one. What is culture? At the end of the day, you're a leader, you're running a team, therefore you are accountable to the culture of your team. What is it? Alrighty, thank you. Question 3, we're going to look at you. All right, this is a little more dangerous. So I'd like you just to gently explore with your colleagues, how's your resilience as a leader? And I'd like you to give it an actual number from +4 to -4. All right, Mark said go. Yeah, good. All right, very good, thank you. Last question. I'd like you to share with each other, where's your team as a team from +4 to -4? How are they traveling right now? Alrighty, thank you. So here's our hypothesis. And it's a little complicated, but you need something to keep your mind busy these days. Our sense of the answer here for you, for your team, for culture, for resilience is in this kind of concept. Do you need to use the words? Absolutely not. But the value of this sort of thing is it's evidence-based. There's science behind each component, both on the organizational or team side and the individual side. As you move through difficult times, I think there's an advantage to being evidence-based. So on the way to a workshop yesterday, we heard about someone who can put vitamins in your body through an app, I think it was, something ridiculous like this. And, now our leader of the free world is dealing with a doctor who believes in demons. So there's, what can I trust in this world and what's a little bit dubious? You've got to ask this question. It's tricky times, right? The cost of failure is extreme. All right, so evidence-based we think is very, very important. There must be some science, and you should be asking, is there any truth to this? If so, show me. All right, second thing, integral. As you sit here, as you think about your teams, they all have bodies. They have a physical well-being or lack thereof. They all have an emotional state. All right, salespeople are naturally resilient because you have to get used to big wins, big losses, and they keep coming. All right, so you learn a lot of resilient stuff intuitively in sales. But I think you can really, really professionalize it. Integral also means we have emotions, right? It means that we have deep feelings. How do you measure that? How do you make sense of that? And we have thoughts. And it's hard to think of any human being without thinking about what's in their mind, what are they feeling in their hearts, and what's happening in their body. All right, so that's called integral, that you respect the different dimensions of being people. And the third thing is practical. All right, so what we've got to do in the next 12 minutes is make sure that you've got something to take back for yourself and to take back for your team. Evidence-based, integral, practical. All right, second piece of this. It's all about altitude. Every single one of you know what it is to be on fire. Those days you go out and you're just nailing the deals. You're connected with your customers. You've got exactly the right solution. They're wanting to sign right there and then. Mike knows all about this. We talk about flow. All right. Every sales leader wants to have as many salespeople as possible in that flow state because you can really knock the ball out of the park. It's good for everybody. It's extremely satisfying. And sometimes you can go out the top of that. All right, most of you would have dealt with manic salespeople. Do you know what bipolar disease? Yeah. So what's the game? Kanye West? He's gone out the top right at the moment. Not funny, right? It does affect 1% of us, and many of these people make very, very good salespeople. So one of the things as sales leaders you just need to be aware of, you don't want to go too high. You want to be super successful, but not blown out into manic psychosis. All right, we also know there are some days that life sucks. It's really bad news. And, many of us are kind of taking day by day at the moment and wondering what's going to hit us in the nose. And some of us have been hit on the nose. It's quite uncomfortable. So our sense here is it's very, very important to understand altitude. Are we going up? Are we going down? As a leader of a team, this is the absolute key responsibility you have. Pay attention. You have got to see how your people are traveling. It's your job to watch. It's your job to check in with their bodies, with their emotions, with their minds. All right, you have to do this. And you can only do that if you check in with yourself. Because frankly, if you allow yourself to get stuck in this area, it's extremely hard to lead. All right, you won't even see what you could be doing. So you've got to ask yourself, how are you traveling? And you've got to work out what resilience means to you. And for each one of us, it's different. How do you get back up? All right, because when you back up at the right level, then you can lead. People can see it, they can smell it. They literally walk into the room with you and they know where you are. Humans are wired for this. A lot of it is happening intuitively, and we can be specific, and that's what we want to get into. Okay, so what is resilience? As Justin said, we talk about 4 learned abilities. You want to recruit for this. You want to train for this. You want to, keep and motivate people for this, and you've got to look after it for yourself. It's the ability to bounce. So when things go pear-shaped, how quickly can you get back up? When someone says, no, I can't, we won't, in fact, we're not going to use you ever again, how quickly do you get back up? Is it a week? Is it a month? Is it a second? If you're operating in an all-black world, it's kind of what they go for is 0.1 of a second. Right? That's why people like Richie McCaw, you could knock him flat, knock him out, and he's up and running before his brain has woken up. All right, that's what serious resilience is, and that's what you want from your salespeople. You want to know that they can bounce. Fair? All right. Second thing is grow. So you can use the growth mindset, Carol Dweck's work, or you can just ask the question, is this someone who's investing in their growth? And that, in my view, boils down to three things. What have you done today to be the best physical, emotional, and mental version of yourself? What did you do yesterday to be that better physical, emotional, mental version of yourself? If you've done nothing this morning, if you did nothing yesterday, you're not on a growth trajectory. You've taken a fixed mindset. All right? In these uncertain times, you absolutely have to be bulletproof with what I call daily practice. Just like no one's going to build a big bicep without working that bicep. Same way, if you want to grow yourself physically, emotionally, mentally, you've got to do the work. All right? You've got to have a daily practice. Third part of resilience, connect. I mean, isn't that the heart of being a salesperson? You've got to connect with the customer. And as Justin says, needs are changing. Never has it been more important for you to be really with your customers and feeling their pain and helping them see the opportunities and really getting a sense of how their needs are changing. If you are in the pit of despair, it's really difficult to connect. Your empathy portal is just shut down. All right, so the third specific thing of resilience is how do we connect? How do we open the empathy portal? And keeping to our real simple themes, how do you see a person's body? What does it tell you? How do you notice how the face, tone of voice operate to give you an insight into their emotions? All right, and how do you get an accurate picture of what they might be thinking right now? All right, this stuff can be learned in 3 different parts of the brain. It's very, very practical. We'll touch on that last. And flow. All right, so what is it? Resilience is about 4 things. Who can say it? Number 1 is bounce. 2, grow. 3, and flow. Anyone know what flow is? A show of hands. What is flow? Could any of you write a quick story for your sales team on flow? Sort of. All right, good. You want to have a go?
Oh, it's okay. I don't need a microphone. Flow is sort of a state where time passes and you don't even
Good.
really know.
Yes.
You're in the zone.
Okay. Good. So a really simple way, I think, to take this forward. Ask yourself the question, when were you last not thinking, not timekeeping, not distressed, and not bored? Or said another way, when your mind is so focused on what you're doing, you forget everything else, most particularly time. Second, it's effortless. Even though it's a difficult thing, you just seem to flow through it. And it's rich. That's the day you go back and you say to those you love, I love my job. What a great day. All right, really important to get a good sense of what flow is and how to do it. All right, makes sense? So what is culture? I don't know, right? I'm no culture, I'm just like a doctor. At the end of the day, it comes down, in my view, to behavior. What behavior do you tolerate in your team? When you tolerate below the line behaviors, you're wrecking your culture. When you demand above the line behaviors, you're growing good culture. At the end of the day, it's what you tolerate. You know, if it's okay for someone in your team to show contempt for another team member and you don't pick it up and you don't challenge it, well, that was a below the line behavior and you've just said it's okay for us to do that to each other. So whether it's showing contempt, whether it's swearing, whether it's not taking care of your body, there are all kinds of ways to do that. And there are many, many ways to shape your culture, but at the end of the day, I think comes down to behavior. And I think you could even simplify it further and integrate it with resilience. That's merely an hypothesis. So let's take a look at the first part, right? Bounce. Here's what you as leaders need to do. You've got to be able to see how a sales team member loses it. Generally, there's too much going on. Too much demand, too much change, too much pressure, too much uncertainty. We get confused. The mind fails in confusion. You disengage. So you should be thinking about the customer, you should be listening to what the customer is saying, but you're just thinking about that glass of wine that's coming in an hour's time. All right, that's disengaged. You think you're present, you're actually not. This is when we start to withdraw. All right, so we don't care. All right, we go quiet. We don't contribute to the team. And then our behaviors start to become a little vulnerable, not vulnerable brown, but vulnerable, in other words, risky. Maybe you're drinking too much, maybe you're eating stuff you shouldn't, maybe you're not sleeping, maybe you're watching too many episodes on Netflix. There are all kinds of ways to be, as we say, drunk alone in front of the TV on Monday night. Then you will experience distress. All right, and distress is where people start to have sleep problems. They get angry, they shout. And get irritable, short tempers. That's the fight response. Or they have anxiety. Anxiety is my biggest concern right now. I think all of us are uncertain about the future. All right, as a consequence, we're in the flight mode. We're avoiding. We're trying to stay out of trouble. We're trying to reduce risk. A scary way to live. All right, and the final part of it is what you call the freeze reaction, where you literally immobilize yourself. All right, so your absolute key takeout here, you've got to understand, and very happy to share these slides, and there's heaps of this free on our website. As a leader of a sales team, if you want resilience, if you want good culture, you must demand and support rapid, skillful bounce. That make sense? All right, really, really key piece. Lesson 2, and if we keep this really, really simple. I'm sorry, I'm moving these the wrong way. Here we go. So this is thinking a little bit about our timing. This is what I call a growth thing. And this is what I think every manager needs, every leader needs. And we see leaders adopting this idea. A sense of committing to your non-negotiables. What will you do every day? All right, and notice things like sleep have got to be there, your flow time's got to be there, your exercise got to be there, your breaks, your smart switching from work to home, difficult sometimes when you're working from, and making sure you have adequate cool down. All right, next lesson, connect. Let's take the bounce idea. So we have anger, snake response, shouting, screaming. Is that useful for our culture? All right, it is not. The problem with anger is it usually operates in the lower part of your brain, just like fear and just like sadness. And you don't notice it until afterwards. All right, the key for good salespeople, for good connections, you've got to bring those feelings to the front of your brain. All right, where you're able to say, I feel angry. Name it. All right, when you can name an emotion, you can actually see on a brain scan the activity moving from the reptile part of your brain to the front of your brain. When you can name it, you can tame it. All right, and then you can reframe it. So yes, we all get angry sometimes. Nothing wrong with being angry. Just don't say to someone, I'm not angry. I'm not. Clearly I'm not. Yeah? So what do you believe? Do you believe the face, the tone of voice? Do you believe the words? Got to be careful, right? You want to be able to say, look, I'm feeling really angry about this. That's good, right? You're putting it on the table. Name it, tame it. Keep it calm, keep it firm, keep it honest. And the third part, reframe it. This is so important with your customers. They are suffering too. And sometimes you'll be frustrated that they're not signing on the dotted line. All right, so you may feel a little angry. You may feel a little frustrated. Name it, tame it, and search for the opposite, which is reframe it. What's the opposite of anger? No. No. It's where you've got to be precision, right? This is where a little bit of resilience evidence is good for you. Kindness. All right, the moment you can switch your attention to being respectful, tolerant, kind, compassionate, altruistic, your anger melts. All right, it's precision engineering. Teach this to yourself. You name it, you tame it, you reframe it. In anger, you go for kindness. In fear, you go for calm or curiosity. All right, and in sadness, you go for appreciation, gratitude, and joy. All right, name, tame, reframe. That's really, at the end of the day, all you need to know about Connect. And it starts with you, and then it goes to your team. How do you help your teams name their feelings? How do you help their teams keep them tame? Keep them calm, keep the snake under control. All right, and how do you help them generate those different emotions? And I guess, last idea, and I keep it real simple. At the end of the day, this is a leadership challenge, right? There's a process. It's a process to biology, it's a process to resilience. Yes, we want flow. You're 5 times more productive in flow. Go for it. Help your teams get there. First problem, you cannot do it all day. You can only do the odd meeting and a couple of hours maybe per day in flow. It is the turbocharger. You'll run out of gas if you try and do your whole day in flow. So pick your moments. Really important. Second thing, and salespeople often get in trouble here, they forget the importance of recovery. You've got to fill the tank when you've been in flow. Many of us have this expectation of just grinding away, hour after hour after hour. We're not taking recovery. Nothing like a high-performing person should be. So work out what you need, whether it's sleep, whether it's massage, whether it's nature. There are all kinds of ways to help that recovery cycle. You don't have to be Novak Djokovic, but you do need to be deliberate about your recovery. And for your team, how many of your team have really got good recovery routines right now? All right, that's been the biggest thing we've seen in leadership teams is the recovery has gone. People are just living in a blur from one screen meeting to the next and on and off. All right, you need to stretch. And then, the last kind of key, relax into the flow. Never rise to the challenge, sink to the level of your training. Never rise to the challenge, sink to the level of your training. You don't want to take a deep breath. You want to exhale, relax into it. And I guess last third, does it work? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. There's heaps of this on the website, but this is roughly what we see, on average, and this is over the whole of 2019. 41% gain, engagement, well-being, emotional skills, mental skills. What things count? If you as a leader want to take some stuff back to your people, those are the big ones. Maybe focus on fulfillment. Really interesting. I worked with a group yesterday. They've done particularly well, but they've really ground their people hard over the last months. Their fulfillment was unbelievably low. That is a huge risk to you as a sales leader. All right, if you focus on things like keeping people, thinking about, geez, I love my job. That's a hugely valuable thing to do. Be practical about that. What is focus? What is presence? What is bounce? There's the evidence is based on over 10,000 people. It's very accurate and reliable. And the second thing, you've got to manage the downside, right? What's below the line? And, whether it's mental health risk or distress, overload, grievance, turnover, those are the key factors. All right, what we look at there, what do your top 10% of people look like as compared to the bottom 10%? Top 10%, don't do worry, don't do fatigue, don't do rumination. All right, so you've got to start understanding what are those real specific things. How do you help your people tackle those to be successful? I'm going to stop there, guys. I've done 3 minutes over time. Questions later, is that all right?
Yeah, perfect. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Sven. I think we all learned a lot from that, especially how the concepts of resilience can be applied to our industry. So thank you. Thank you again. All right, next up, we have Mike Stokes. So well, Sven, you did stop short. There he is. All right. So Mike is the CEO and founder of the Indicator Group, which works with sales leaders, salespeople, and businesses to improve their sales capability. I've known Mike for a long time, and he is a huge advocate of the role that sales enablement has in the success of an organization. Mike, welcome up.
Thank you very much. Right, morning everyone. Thank you, Justin, for the invite today and for the introduction. Firstly, can I say I'm a big advocate of the work that Sven does. I think it is so important with people in sales and sales leadership. I'd also like to say it completely sucks to follow Sven as a speaker because he is so good and so compelling, but I'll do my best. So ultimately what I wanted to share with you today was a little bit about some research that we've been doing with sales leaders about their challenges, expectations, and how they're tracking towards towards targets. So, but I thought I'd first start with, if I can get this working, I'll first start with, now it says up there, this is my definition of resilience. It's a complete lie. I did not say this quote, but I think it's quite a good one, which is an ability to recover from or adjust easily to change or misfortune. And I think we can all recognise that in the last 5 months we've had massive change. And it's been, as Justin said, for a lot of companies and a lot of individuals, very, very difficult time. For me, as I've found and talking to a lot of people as well, I loved lockdown. It was fantastic for a lot of reasons. I found it very productive, but it absolutely came with some challenges. In terms of resilience from a sales perspective, I think it's almost like the number one trait that we need to have, because we all have these massive highs and massive lows of winning deals, of losing deals. We have this thing, which I'm sure most of you will recognise, that sits above us all the time, which is targets. And everywhere we go, these targets follow you. And they're hard to get away with. You can run faster and faster, but they keep following you. The only time you get away from them is perhaps when they're a bit behind you, when you're ahead of your targets, but they're likely to jump back in front of you at some stage as well. So what we wanted to do is, with our research, was understand sales leaders and what their challenges and expectations were. So we started releasing the Mood of the Sales Leader 3 years ago, and where we survey sales leaders to understand what's going on in their world. I've put this one up here. This is in January this year, the third report we released. We had contributions from 226 sales leaders who were collectively responsible for over 10 billion in revenue, and were looking after or managing close to 5,000 staff. So really cross-section of industries, and not a small case study by any stretch. One of the things, that's jumped out a bit, but that's okay, we'll talk through that. One of the things that we wanted to understand is, firstly, from, if we look at this one here, this is the report in 2018, 19 and 20. In 2018, we found that 88% of sales leaders were expecting growth for the year ahead. That seemed to drop and decline in the couple of years ahead of that. Then after we came out of COVID, we resurveyed the sales leaders to understand where they're now saying. Now, unfortunately, these were supposed to jump out as a bit of a surprise, but in May of this year, we had 20% of sales leaders telling us that they were expecting growth in the year ahead. So, which is a massive drop and extremely challenging for all sales leaders. I would hasten to say that I think if we did that now, I think that might be a little bit higher, because I think if you talk to a lot of companies at the moment, they're all saying typically, we're busier than we expect. We're busier than we expect. We hope it goes on. Could be a false economy. We don't know. But then when we found, which was really interesting, which was to me a significance around resilience, was when we asked them in 2018, what's the mood like? How are you feeling for the year ahead? We had 1% of people who were saying they're pessimistic about the year ahead. 1%. And literally it was actually one person. So we were kind of worried, thinking that maybe that person had an extremely bad day or something along those lines, but it was 1%. We had a decent jump up to 8% in 2019. In 2020 it went up again. So when we resurveyed them in May, the expectation, or I certainly had an expectation, was that it was going to be about 30%. And what we got was only 4% of sales leaders were pessimistic about the year ahead, which for me was firstly quite startling, but also it speaks volumes in my mind, is that if you're going to be a sales leader or a person in sales, you need to be resilient. And by only 4% of people showing pessimism, they're basically saying, well, the new norm is here, let's crank into it. And so I love that about sales leaders. When we asked them at the start of the year, what were their biggest risks, we got things like competition, and that was always a big one. Competition is getting, for most companies, harder and harder, and margins eroding, things like that. At the start of the year, we had At the start of the year, we had things like government and so forth come through. Then we asked them again in March. Obviously, we had this massive red flag that came through from global pandemic. So none of us knew what was going to happen. We were all pretty concerned about it. And but some of the interesting things for us, again, when in the May survey, was some of the softer things started coming through from sales leaders. So in terms of things like negative impact on culture, we knew that was going to be a significant one. Internal communication was going to be a problem. But the big one there, which once again speaks to me about how important the sales leaders think about resilience, was concerns about their staff. So what we loved about that was, sales leaders were going, well, it's the new norm, let's bring it on. But they were very concerned about their staff and how they were feeling. And for a number of staff, we all know they lost, some of them were on 80%, in terms of salary and things like that. So for us, that was quite a surprise. So if I jump back in terms of that, ability to recover or adjust easily to misfortune or change, I think New Zealand sales leaders do it really well. I think they do. And, for me personally, as I said, I really enjoyed lockdown. I found lockdown an incredibly productive time. And I think for a lot of companies, they're telling us out there the same thing, that things, that just hastened the changes that we were looking to make. So in finish, I'm going to give my 6 things for sales leaders to follow on. Sven, you're welcome to critique me on these if you would like to focus on, should I say. So for me, before you look after others, you've got to look after yourself. Kind of like the in-flight video when the mask drops down and they say you got to look after yourself before you look after others. I don't think you can manage salespeople well or really be successful in terms of what you're doing if you're in great shape. That's why the work that Sven does is so important. As a leader, you set the scene. If you're hiding under a table or yelling or screaming and you're stressed, the others are going to follow that pretty quickly. Be comfortable with change. Well, we all know that's happening, right? So I quite like this quote: change is inevitable, but growth is intentional. So meaning in terms of, did we learn a lot out of the changes that were coming? You could also transpose that one that says, the famous quote that says, if you dislike change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. I think it's just part of where we are. We'll see technology is just going to massively change the way we focus on things. We already see that already. The number of Zoom calls and so forth. What was the stat that Zoom is now worth more than the whole American aviation industry, which is just amazing in such a short space of time. This one's, I think, really important. Lots of companies at the moment are doing, more remote working. Companies are, shutting down offices, and I think it's incredibly hard to pick up on social cues when you're on Zoom or when you're on other platforms. So not having people around the office as much, around the water cooler conversations, it's a challenge. And it's also a challenge when you're dealing with prospects and customers as well. So I think that's something that we all need to keep an eye on. When coaching people, you have to coach the whole person. And what I mean by that is that how they're going personally or how they are physically or mentally is really going to affect the role that they play. I was with a client yesterday, and she's lost 40 kgs in the last 6 months. So she's basically dropped a third of her weight. And what she said to me was, look, I look better, I feel better, all those things I knew was coming, but my confidence has gone through the roof, my mental clarity has gone through the roof. In terms, she said, I'm just far out delivering on what I used to beforehand. So I think that's really important. And reculture, I think that's a really important one as well. So when the laughter stops, you're in trouble. So I think that's for your own laughter, but certainly from a team cultural perspective as well. All right. Happy with those ones, Sven? Yeah, thumbs up. Okay, well, thanks everyone. That's all from me. So thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I think with New Zealand's unique situation globally, getting some data from New Zealand sales leaders is pretty valuable right now. Great to see we're such an optimistic bunch as well. Really good. Well, as many of you may know, Salesforce is globally recognized as the world's #1 CRM. And they really give Lavabox the innovation and the scale and the power that we need to develop the solutions that our clients expect. And so from Salesforce this morning, we first up have Kelly Sykes, Senior Solution Engineer, who'll be taking us through a demo of the latest Salesforce innovations to enable the work from anywhere sales team. And followed by that, we have Ben Sheehan, Sales Manager of Growth Business at Salesforce, speaking to leading in the new normal. Over to you.
Cool. Testing. That's right, isn't it? Thank you, Justin. And thank you, everyone, for coming along to today's session. Do appreciate you taking the time out of your day today, especially in this sort of roller coaster of a world that we're currently living in. So today I'm going to take you through how you too can enable the work from anywhere sales team using the power and the capability that's built into the Salesforce platform. Now, before we get started, I do have to take you through our forward-looking statement. A lot of you have probably seen this before. We'll just take 5 minutes to read it. No. So basically what this says is that we are a publicly listed company, so please make your purchasing decisions based on products and features that are available today. So today I'm going to take you through a day in the life of two different personas. So the first being Cindy, our sales rep, and second being our ridiculously good-looking sales manager, Ben. I'm going to show you how both of these personas interact with Salesforce to not only provide value to their customers during this weird time, but also to continue growing the business post-COVID. So continue that momentum from pre-COVID to post. So, we all know that the way businesses are currently having to work has fundamentally changed. We're seeing that, we have to adapt to an online way of working. And of course, with working online comes with its own challenges, right? So working from home, we're struggling to stay on top of things. We're struggling to communicate with each other, collaborate with our customers. So it's really important to have the right tools that enable you to do that. The other piece is we are seeing, as Justin alluded to earlier, we're seeing added complexity in our customers' sales processes, our sales processes as well. So they're a lot more complex, they're involving a lot more stakeholders, and overall the customers' evaluation criteria is just a lot more evolved. But you've seen how with Salesforce and Zoom integration, you're able to stay connected with your customers and your prospects, regardless of where you are, regardless of where they are. And you've seen how Salesforce can help you to think more strategically, become more creative in your sales, because the old normal is no longer relevant to us. So, and I think the final thing there is Salesforce will enable you to help to continually grow your business, keep up that pre-COVID momentum, which I think is what every business wants these days. So with that, I will hand back to Ben, or hand over to Ben, our devilishly good-looking sales manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Revealing far too many of my secrets there, but I'll take it as well. First of all, just want to say thanks to the Lavabox team for having me here today. Dr. Sven and Mike, thank you guys for speaking prior as well. Sven, I've seen a couple of WhatsApp messages come from the New Zealand leadership team. Some of them are here who especially resonated with the drunk on a couch on a Monday night quip that you made a little bit earlier. I've been fortunate enough to have met some of you previously. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Ben Sheehan. I lead Salesforce's growth business, or SMB business, here in New Zealand. So looking after our sort of small, medium-sized organisations across the country as well. Arguably the most hit throughout COVID-19, throughout lockdown. But I'm fortunate enough to lead a team of 7, soon to be 8, very social, very outgoing, very extroverted salespeople. And I wanted to start today by telling you a bit of a story. So our start of financial year is every February, and at the start of every financial year, we go through a degree of goal setting. We call it our V2 MOM. We go through and we define our vision, our values, our methods, our obstacles and measures. I got that right, didn't I? We do that every sort of start of February, right? And we went through and did that thinking, hey, we're hearing these little sort of nuggets about a bit of a pandemic going on, but things will be fine. I then got halfway through February, and I was fortunate enough to go on a bit of parental leave, spend some time with my little girl, which was absolutely fantastic. And, we managed to get a little bit of travel in, we managed to get out of town, do some work around the house, do all that cool stuff, and actually disconnect from work. And that was really valuable. That was really cool. I came back to work on March 23rd, and I walked into the office. I just a little bit of time off. It's all good. I walked back to the office, coffee in hand, swiped my card, walked in. No one was there. And that's actually kind of not unusual for a sales office, effectively, right? Everyone's out on the road, so that's totally fine. 10 o'clock rolled around, 11, 12, still the only guy in the office. And then at 2 o'clock, my phone rang, and it was our managing director, Craig Skinner, who some of you may have met as well. Ben, go home. Okay. And so I just had this time off work, and he told me, mate, we're shutting down all the offices worldwide. 50,000 of us are transitioning to a completely work from home model. And that was the day before the New Zealand government put the whole country into lockdown, right? So to move from a model where we were relatively flexible to start with, but to a point where all 50,000 staff worldwide are working from home was a massive challenge in its own. Now, for me as a sales leader, that sort of truly tested some of the 3 core principles that I'm going to talk you through today in terms of how I lead. Now, I wanted to start this as well by saying that I'm a new leader. I'm someone that's been in this position for just under 2 years now, but leadership for me is always something that I wanted to do. And I put it down to the fact that I'm the youngest of 3 boys and I never really got to say anything. So Leon will know that as well. So I'll talk you through a few little guiding sort of principles that I've had over the last 2 years that really sort of showed through throughout COVID-19. Number 1 is that it starts with trust. Absolutely what it starts with, and that's mutual trust between yourself and your team. Now, I've worked in environments where I thought I was trusted by my boss and thought I was trusted by the company. And then sort of little things sort of started coming through. So I'll give you an example. I was a sort of fresh, 18 or so year old, first year in the workforce, and I wanted to work from home. I wanted to do a little bit of work from home after hours. That was totally fine. And for me, just to get access to webmail was a massive process. And it came down to the fact that I actually really wasn't trusted. And traditionally, as employers, we haven't actually genuinely really trusted our staff. We've wanted them in the office from 8:30 till 5, maybe an hour for lunch if you're lucky. We've sort of locked down the systems that they can access outside of hours. We've really wanted to maintain that control on them. And for a lot of companies that we work with and a lot of companies that, I'm sort of connected with through family and friends and so on, that became very evident during lockdown, is that there wasn't a whole lot of trust out there that was sort of sitting within these organizations. A family member of mine who will remain unnamed, who works for a large multinational as well, he had an interesting time because for the first 4 or 5 days, they weren't even prepared enough to give people access to work from home. They didn't trust them to do that in the past. And then when it came time to actually turn that on, they were running on the equivalent of a home internet connection, connecting back to some servers on site. So that was really, really tough. What this accumulates in is I firmly believe that everybody that works within my team wants to do right by me. They want to do right by me, they want to do right by themselves as well. And so one of the things that I've been very explicit about from day dot is letting them know that I trust them and I expect that trust in return as well. So I trust them to work flexibly. I know that if they have commitments outside of work, if they have kids, if they need to go after the doctors, they need to go to the dentist, whatever, that's fine because I know that they will make that up, right? And I have that absolute trust in them that they'll perform. And the way that that sort of works in return as well is that I trust them to go and make their own decisions in a lot of ways. I trust them to have autonomy and I trust them to run their part of the business like it's their own. And that means that I have to have their back if they fail. Now, as we started going through COVID, right, we had to give them a lot of leeway, a lot more autonomy, a lot of that sort of trust really had to be put to the test as well. But what that resulted in was really quite interesting. We said to them, go focus on your customers, go look after them. Here's the guidelines you can operate in, but just make sure they're well looked after. And that trust accumulated in hundreds upon hundreds of cases raised to help our customers out from a financial perspective. Accumulated in a lot of pivoting type conversations away from sales and more towards how can we help, as Kelly mentioned before. But what it actually resulted in as well was growth, right? So those conversations, those areas that we started helping out in, our customers started trusting us in return as well. Hey, these guys have got my back. And what we've seen, the net result of that is as we come to the end of our first half of the year, is a growth number, which is something which is pretty fantastic to see as a sales leader as well. So I'd ask yourselves as you leave today, am I really showing my team that I trust them? Am I really giving them the tools to go and get things done? Am I really showing them that I believe that they will do right by me if I do right by them? So number one for me, it starts with trust. Number two, so this is all great and all right. We had lockdown was really interesting times, as for everybody. Being stuck in the house with a 1-year-old was absolutely fantastic, as you can expect. And we went through some really, really interesting times. And as that sort of weird high of lockdown started wearing off, we started seeing people get a little bit demotivated, a little bit tired. They're all dealing with a lot of work. I know my calendar went absolutely ballistic and I was sitting on Zoom calls all day, every day is what it felt like. Now, this was really interesting and I wanted to take it to a book that I read right at the start of this year. And I'm not one for, I'm not much of a reader. My mum will clip me around the ears because she's a librarian. But I'm not much of a reader, and I'm especially not much of a reader of business books because what I tend to find is they tell you how good the book is. They then tell you the model, and then they tell you how good the model is again, right? So that's sort of typically how it goes for me as well. But one book that I picked up was one called Primed to Perform. And what that explores is what motivates people. Now, if I was to ask the room, what do you think motivates salespeople? What's the number one thing that you'll sort of probably say? It's money, right? Actually, that's wrong. That's not quite right. Economic pressure, emotional pressure, and inertia are things that are actually demotivators. And so for these people that were sitting at home, that were extroverted, social, outgoing people, we couldn't just throw money at them to continue getting results. At the end of the day, we're a publicly listed company. Our shareholders expect returns. But what Prime to Perform teaches is that there's actually 3 key motivators that I encourage you to think about. Purpose, play, and potential. Now, I'll do this in reverse order because it's probably a little bit easier. But when you start with potential, during lockdown, it's really hard to have conversations around what the potential of you within this business is. You know, how can you grow your career? Because let's face it, there was a lot of uncertainty out there. There was a lot of challenging economic environments that were happening. There were a lot of customers that unfortunately were going under, and it was really tough to see. So it was really tough to have those conversations around potential. But we had to power through. And so we had to continue focusing on the positive and focusing on, hopefully in 6 months' time, we're going to be out of this and we can carry those career conversations on. We can carry on those potential conversations. Number 2 was play. We had to make it a fun environment. And, you know, for a bunch of salespeople that enjoy a little drink after work and enjoy a bit of a get-together, that's kind of tough because we couldn't do that. And so our team meetings moved away from, hey, let's focus on the results, to more, man, let's have a good time. What's everyone been up to? Tell us what's going on. And we started running some awesome quizzes. We started having a really good time doing it as well. And we were very, very, very focused on making sure that it was as fun an environment as we possibly could. But the final and the most powerful motivator that worked for us really, really well during lockdown, and is something which is holding true as we go into the new normal, is that of purpose. And purpose is a really interesting thing because when we went into the start of the year and we focused on what our vision was for the organisation for FY21, we thought our purpose was to go out there and just sell a whole bunch of stuff. But what we then realised that as COVID started hitting and a lot of small, medium businesses were taking the impact of it, is that our purpose had to change. We had to pivot. Now, what that sort of ended up in was actually a session amongst the team of, well, what are we here to do? It just so happens we have the technology to help organisations grow. It just so happens we help the technology to help organisations in some ways, unfortunately, become more efficient. But what it actually meant is that our purpose had to be redefined. And what that ended up in was a session with the team to work on what that looked like. And our purpose ended up being, we are here to help small, medium businesses bounce back from COVID. And that changed things. That changed things for us. It changed us away from account executives and business development people to small business advisors. And what that meant is the team weren't going out there fishing for that sort of next deal. They were going out there with expertise. They were going out there with, I know how you should be doing things better in the future. Let me take you on a bit of a ride. So it doesn't matter if any of you are sitting in here and you build homes, you develop software, you're in the tourism market, whatever it might be. What I would encourage you to do is think about, what is the purpose of your team? What are they actually really out there to do? Because that is the absolute number one motivator, and that's something which we proved within our team, is they went out and delivered a growth number this half as well, despite the circumstances. The final bit from me. This is an obvious one, right? And having a chat with Leon from Digital Island before this, right, they were absolutely chaotic when it came to lockdown because they had to spin up a whole ton of cloud-based phone systems. But give your teams the tools to get the job done. Give them trust, give them purpose, give them the tools to get the job done. It is incredible to see how many SMBs out there just aren't investing in technology. They're not investing in technology to let their team work flexibly, work the hours that they need to, work from wherever they need to as well. We're really fortunate at Salesforce that we run everything entirely cloud-based, right? So it doesn't matter if I'm sitting here or, I was in Queenstown over the weekend, fortunately, as every other Aucklander is at the moment, but I was able to pull up my phone and do work, and that's not a problem at all. But it was incredible to see how many organizations just weren't prepared for that as well. As you'll start to see more and more millennials start to come into your workforce as well, they expect this of you guys. And they expect this of organizations to be able to give them the tools and give them the environment to go and get the job done on their terms. Just like your customers want to work with you on their terms, so do your employers. Flexibly, from anywhere, access the systems, access the data as well. So I'd highly, highly encourage you to think about that. So, really quick, short, sharp from me, 3 sort of key lessons. Trust, purpose, play, and potential. Go read that book. I know it's a lot of fun. But finally, give them the tools to get the job done. That's it from me. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Kelly and Ben. Now, next up, we have a Lavabox and Salesforce customer, Greg Arnold from Kitchenmania. Greg and us have been on a pretty fascinating journey over the past 18 months to really bring their business onto cloud platforms. And the journey they've been on, especially over the past few months with COVID, it's been fascinating and quite inspirational for us to learn how it's all been going for them. So we'll now invite Greg Arnold up for a conversation with me.
Thank you.
All right, Greg, just to kick things off, this is your moment. Tell us about Kitchenmania and what you do. And then we'll get into the COVID journey.
Brilliant. So very quickly, we're a family business. We started 11 years ago with 3 people making kitchens on a blanket in the middle of this massive factory that we didn't know why we'd leased it right in the middle of the global financial crisis. But we've sort of powered through. We've created a team of people that stand behind us now. Let's quickly show everyone our beautiful faces.
Look at that.
So from our side, we go and see people in their homes. We talk to them about what they like and don't like about their current kitchen, work with the customer, create a pretty cool 3D of their kitchen. Then we manufacture the kitchen, we deliver it, and we install it for our customers, all sort of a full encompassing service. So that's what we do around Auckland.
Thanks. And just when you look at the journey that you've been on over the past 2 years to really transition Kitchenmania onto the cloud, can you give us the high level overview of what that's looked like for you, where you came from and where you've sort of got to?
Yeah, I guess in the crowd there's probably some very technically capable people, but we're sort of more practically minded at Kitchenmania. So the whole idea around cloud-based computing and CRM packages, and they're all sort of crazy buzzwords, which sort of we knew were probably important in some way, but didn't really know how to approach that. So really the first indicator came when the IT company said, "Oh, your terminal server is about to go out of servicing and we recommend that you get a new one. I was like, okay, brilliant. How long is that going to last? Probably another 3 years. And how much is that going to cost? Probably around $90,000. And so I just thought, nuts and bolts, ABC, this doesn't really make sense. And so let's have a look at some other ideas or opportunities. And so the IT company that we were working with at the time were quite keen to sell us $90,000 worth of a massive box thing that they would get another $90,000 for in 3 years' time. They weren't that keen to give us any other ideas about cloud-based computing, all of the things that we're now involved in. And so I sort of thought, well, I know they've been really good to us for 10 years or 9 years, but they don't really seem very proactive in this environment. So let's go and see what other people can do. So that sort of started the journey with us. And so we made a decision to change everything to a Google Suite environment and also bring Salesforce on board. And that's when we engaged with Lavabox to customize Salesforce so that it looked and felt like what our salespeople and team members were used to day to day.
Perfect, thanks. And let's fast forward now. So take us into the war room when COVID-19 hit for Kitchenmania. Tell us about those conversations and what were the first things that you decided to do?
Yeah, the war room sounds very organised and very well thought out. But the war room sort of turned into everybody looking at each other and wondering what the hell we're going to do. We had about 25 customers sitting with half-finished kitchens with no bench tops in their homes, and these people, most of our customers are sort of young families with kids that need kitchens and running water and those sort of things. So the first 2 days of level 3 was spent with literally accounts people driving to Hastings to pick up temporary sinks. We had a technical person on the truck delivering temporary bench tops to customers, and literally doing anything we could to try and service our customers first. And that wasn't a decision that I made per se. It was a decision of, shit, this is what we're looking at. These customers potentially are looking at like a 4 to 6 week time with no kitchens. And so it was pretty cool to see that the team sort of bound around and thought of our customers first. And within doing that, that's had a massive knock-on effect for the culture of our company and coming back. And even to the extent where some of the team they were in supermarket lines during lockdown telling customers in front and behind them about what we did in the sort of lead up to the lockdown. So
awesome.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if you look at how the team functioned through lockdown and coming out the other side and the role that technology played to help pull all of that together, walk us through sort of the strategy and how it all kind of came to life.
I guess part of that relates back to the position we were in sort of 18 months ago, and with a terminal server, if we were lucky, we were able to VPN into our then CRM package and get a number from a customer, maybe an email address, but you might be looking at like 25, 30 minutes to access that via the VPN. So just in having that sort of cloud-based stuff, we were able to quickly make decisions, and it felt like our IT wasn't our hurdle. It was about what we could do, how we could utilise the opportunities that we had in front of us to come up with the best ideas to service the customers.
And you mentioned, I think when we previously spoke, there was some structural changes you made in terms of like how the teams work together and bringing some new roles into that same CRM environment, and even changes to the sales process. How did that all sort of come to life?
Yeah, so we gave it a couple of days because we had about 100 customers calling us wanting their deposits back, which was a pretty scary couple of days. But sort of after the initial dust had settled, we sort of, I guess pivoted is a word that's been used a lot at the moment, but we pivoted to think about, okay, we're going to be in this situation for 4 to 6 weeks. What are we going to do? So the sales team quickly came together. We used the Google Meet function, which was sort of all very new and probably unused before lockdown for us. And all of a sudden we were coming up with ideas, and we had everyone in an environment that was able to put forward ideas. And even one interesting thing, I don't know if anyone else has seen it, but in a meeting room, you sort of get the same people coming up with the ideas and trying to own a discussion and putting forward their ideas. In a Zoom or Google Meet environment, it seemed like it was easier for the people that don't usually come out with ideas to put their ideas forward. And so essentially our sales team were able to continue to design kitchens for customers with the 3D package, use a Google Meet to interact with those customers and literally walk them through the kitchen. So our customers were sitting at home, sometimes in their pajamas and whatever else. Our sales team were also at home, which brought a level of sort of trust as well, I think, to the conversations, but they were able to continue 100% as they would normally in presenting plans and designs. So that was pretty awesome for us. The second thing was we have a technical side of the business, which once the kitchens have been confirmed, we have a group of architect type people that will go through and make sure all the details are correct. And one of the things is that we had this horrible file of sort of 150 pieces of paper that would accompany every single kitchen. And in lockdown, that's a pretty hard thing to send around to different homes and things. So very quickly, we were able to go from this big file to a paperless file, which we had a plan to do in 12 to 18 months, but we were able to implement that pretty quickly within a week.
Awesome. And coming out the other side, I mean, I guess firstly, what do things look like for you now, and what's the impact of all of this been? And then finally, has there been any initiatives that COVID-19's led you to fast track with your technology, I suppose, as well?
Sure. So I guess one of the things was, and it harks back to a little bit of our culture, was I remember getting a call from our radio person saying, so I guess you want to cancel your advertising too this month? And I sort of thought, oh, hang on, there might be a little opportunity here. So
sure, we don't want to hire that person.
So I think she'd been nailing calls literally all day for people cancelling marketing contracts and advertising. But I thought the radio probably has to keep going, and people are going to be at home, and people are going to be also in their home using their kitchens, and hopefully realising that they're really tired and they need to reward themselves. So we took the approach of let's continue the advertising. Let's ask the radio people what they can do to help us as well. And they were very helpful in what they offered us. But let's try and understand our customers better. Let's try and get alongside them and try and give them something to do in the lockdown period as well. So that was pretty cool.
Awesome. And then in terms of what's next, tell us how it's all looking now.
So what's next was in May, we came back after everyone being away from the office during April, and usually we sell approximately about 55 or 60 kitchens a month. In May, we sold 119 kitchens, and that literally was down to these guys. They worked tirelessly at home. They didn't stop. I think they were more connected than they were when they were actually at work, and that was a lot of feedback that was coming back. We sort of had Friday drinks. Even the people that don't drink were,
lockdown
adding their bit and turning up, which was cool to see. So from our side, we have, and I know and I appreciate not everyone will be in the same situation, but for us the COVID thing has actually worked in a positive way for us. It's definitely been really challenging, and there's no doubt about that. But we were able to keep everyone employed. We were able to come back to a full book of people wanting kitchens. And so probably one of the biggest things we're dealing with now, and it's been alluded to a little bit today, is the expectation of customers. And this is not a bad thing, because I think the expectation of customers should be there. They shouldn't accept things that aren't good enough or not up to scratch. But there is a little bit of a feeling and a little bit of chat from customers around, if I'm spending money in this environment, then I expect it to be a notch. I expect a proper service, and I'm not gonna accept that people are busy and it might arrive, it might not arrive. So from our side, we we saw that pretty quickly. It's something that we're trying to make sure that we're all over, and the communication back to customers, keeping them up to date with things, is definitely something that we've sort of put on the top of the agenda for things that we need to keep improving.
Yeah, next on our list, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, Greg, thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing the story. Really quite inspirational and insightful. So thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Perfect. And now just our final talk of the morning before the panel. No worries. I'd like to welcome Robert Lim from Track DDB up to share some of the fascinating research they've done throughout the entire pandemic journey on New Zealand consumers. And it's really quite timely. So it's connecting with customers in times of uncertainty. Welcome, Robert Lim.
No, just use microphone. Yeah, actually, can I click it? Brilliant, the microphone is busy. Right. Just make sure. Excuse me. Which one's which?
Oh, sorry, sideways. That one. Yeah, she's gone.
Oh.
All right. The guy with the most slides and the clicker's gone.
All right, here we go. There we go. So, which one? There you go. Here we go. So, well, thank you for having me here. It's a great event, great energy, great venue as well. So, thank you. That's better. Connecting with customers in still uncertain times. So, look, I'm going to go through three things. Something about listening to New Zealanders, a project we ran. That's 5 minutes on that. Some lessons for sales and marketing leaders. Where I'm going to focus back a little bit more. Less on New Zealand as a whole, but on the business of selling, and just a reflection from me on why I still think it pays to be human, even as we seek to automate everything. First of all, listening to New Zealanders. Look, we ran a study with an insights engine which we called Motivators Plus, basically based upon Harvard's implicit association test with a company from the UK called Innovation Bubble. Simply works with about 1,200 New Zealanders 5 times over the last 3 months. Well, we put up different images and words, and then give them very, very little time to make associations with other images and words. So we get to see what they're saying they're thinking and feeling versus what they're actually feeling. Here are just 5 top insights that came through from this last period of a few months, particularly first one starting in that first level 4, level 3. We were surprised at first that a great many New Zealanders were not actually drowning, but they were waving. A lot of New Zealanders were saying, we feel anxious, we feel alone, we feel disconnected, and we feel very concerned about the world. Whereas, in fact, they didn't feel that concerned about the world, and they felt a lot calmer than we expected. They were, in fact, responding increasingly to their bubble, as a lot of we were, rather than the pandemic. Now, we found ourselves and a lot of our clients were rather responding quite aggressively and proactively to the pandemic, and perhaps not enough to what customers were actually thinking, which was much more closed. We discovered during those early phases as well. Quite surprisingly, there was less curiosity than we expected as people got on with being within their bubble. Now, there are, of course, exceptions, but those were generally felt. Something that kept troubling us through this, we had quite a large number of small business owners during this survey period of time. In the first phase, we found that despite a lot of media attention about how tough things were going to get for SMEs, and for God's sake, for some SMEs, it's been very, very tough, that actually there was a really strong inbuilt resilience and calmness in that first phase. And so we went out to market and said, well, SMEs have not yet really sort of fully processed their feelings yet. But it kept coming back. And every time we ran the study, we found 2 things about SMEs. Generally speaking, that business owners have shown a greater degree of calm and resilience than we expected. But also that unlike a lot of other audiences, there was almost no difference on every single scale between what they said they felt versus what they were actually feeling. There was an incredible consistency. So if you're asking small business owners and small business customers what they really think and feel, you're probably going to get an honest answer. Safe till September, we'll see. There's a lot of change ahead. There's still a lot of anxiety around as well. My golly, one thing we can say for sure is that particularly 21 to 25-year-olds, and we in our team have got a lot of 21 to 25-year-olds, the very group that have been working and living with and communicating through remote channels like no one else and not needing physical connection have been so crushed by that lack of physical connection. It's really interesting. We have found across the survey, time and time again, millennials, young millennials, people between age 20, 21, 25, saying they felt calm, saying they didn't feel so isolated, and yet anxiety levels going and loneliness going through the roof as well at the moment. So we've been that in some ways for a number of you who work with younger people and younger yourself, or you've got children too. Is in some ways a continuation of quite a lot of existential anxiety that exists as well. But it is still there right now, even as we are in level 1. We're seeing a huge hunger and desire for entertainment and connection as well. It's been quite interesting that it's been us urbanites as well as millennials who seem to have struggled most with this lack of connection, whereas rural New Zealand has just been getting on with it. It's really interesting, this very last phase, the current phase we're in, there's almost been a degree of apathy, not negativity, but apathy towards the crisis in some parts of rural New Zealand. So that was just a little snapshot of some of the things we've discovered. Now, I'll be sharing with Justin the full report from level 4 and the latest one as well, which is something to delve into if at all you're interested in. I'll leave it at that. Wondering about lessons, not only from just personal experience as someone who I guess is a sales and marketing leader as well with a team of 60 people, just a few quick reflections from me. There's been a lot of noise recently from some of the big consulting giants about what we should be doing. Here's Accenture in June shouting at us. It was actually quite a good deck, actually, about how we must refocus, reimagine, reset, and proactively outpace everyone else. One thing is true, is that whilst this is based upon North America from McKinsey and based upon also upon Europe, I've been startled at the shift in preference towards digital interfaces, even more so than I imagined. I mean, we can say digital is an essential means of business. That is absolutely true. People have been force migrated and they are staying there. Live chat now being a top channel for researching suppliers in much of Europe and North America too. One little reflection though, there's a lot of focus needs to be put on speed, transparency, and of course expertise, and optimizing channel connections, but also on fixing our top buyer frustrations. And whilst that's absolutely true, I also want to make a couple more personal reflections because I think there's a little danger in that. I've noticed with my own account management team, there's been a hell of a lot of focus on fixing things up and a lot of focus in a SWOT analysis process that seems to just keep starting with weaknesses. We're focusing a lot on our weaknesses and what we got to do to fix up, which is fair enough, but you can only ever play to your strengths. I was at a session like this, a remote session at the beginning of lockdown, and a guy from Hong Kong, a planner, he said, well, when did Noah build the ark? And I thought, well, it's kind of a myth creation thing. He didn't really build the ark, but he came out and said before the flood. And there's a truth that we should still be thinking about what kind of art we're building and playing to our strengths as well. Just reflecting on a couple of our clients. McDonald's, I think, started to build their arc very early. They were planning on how to get out of lockdown well before lockdown through sheer aggression and competitive energy, approaching almost anger at times. It was extraordinary. Was AA Insurance, who are New Zealand's most trusted insurance. Sometimes for us they're a client of ours, they can feel a bit slow and a bit conservative and a bit technologically not so savvy. And we waited, and after 2 weeks, their arc was built over their values, by the way. They just quietly decided they were going to be the first people to give an awful lot of money back to their customers. And they made that decision, and it made a huge impact. Their arc was built of values. I think ours as a whole has been built out of creativity, but I think it pays to ask, these are still uncertain times, what are we going to build our arc out of? And what's the thing that's going to withstand us? And technology will be a key to that, but there are other things that make us strong as well, as a number of you have mentioned, actually. The second thing that is in a crisis, there is so much truth that doing is better than talking. I ran a survey. We have 250 odd people in the DDB group of the people's favourite advertising during the course of lockdown. And it was really interesting. Very few people could remember a darn thing, even some of the wonderful things we created ourselves. But I was getting back, in the survey, so many little comments like, yes, but my gym just let me pass on membership fees for a month. And that was amazing. I was getting back loads and loads of comments that weren't even in answer to the question about great marketing advertising. They were about people taking stands and action. And I'm reminded of a great adage by a guy called David Meister that said, the trusted advisor puts a greater value on the long-term relationship versus the outcomes of the current transaction, which you're in a short-term selling cycle and you run by Omnicom. It's really, really hard to do. But there's a real truth in that, and I think that's been coming to the fore. The other point, and someone else has mentioned this so well, that listening is a form of communication. We've been so dialed up and anxious that we've been falling over ourselves to sell and be creative, and there's been some great strength in that. But we've had to go back to some basic practices around listening. I think someone mentioned, I think it was Ben, about, but there's a really important question, which is, how can we help you? It's not this is how we can help you, it's how can we help you? And we found that with our clients and ourselves, that and our clients with big groups of customers, we've never found customers more keen and eager to tell us how they're feeling, and also to let us test out ideas on them before we actually go and create them. So easy to forget at this time, but very important in both a B2C context, but also a business-to-business context. And we came across the value of listening a little bit too late for my liking within lockdown. Lean into the difference may sound a bit trite, but it's the whole survey study reminded me and reminded our team of just how different emotional states have been within different groups of New Zealanders, and particularly around our millennial groups. I'm not sure that we or some of our clients have worked hard enough on that very fact. So it's worth just considering and stopping to think about. But it's also been true of us in a B2B sales environment. We've actually got, we work with large enterprise clients. We've got about 11 clients really, and in a great year, 1.5, 2 more clients is what we seek. We've been amazed at the difference in responses and feelings and working practices within those group of 11. And we have really found one size has not fitted all, particularly compared to organisations that have really embraced agile work practices versus non-agile, by the way. Some people can be critical of some elements of large organisations who just embrace agile very quickly, but it's certainly helping organisations like Vodafone and Westpac right now in ways that they did not imagine. And finally, look, it might sound a bit trite in terms of learnings, but the fortune really does favour those in motion. If I'm absolutely honest with you, we're not a research company. We undertook that research, that Emotics research, to understand what was happening in New Zealanders. And some of the findings got completely lost in the noise. There was news every single day. And some of the findings were not as definitive as we wanted. But it started us having so many conversations about what customers want, how to manage data, how to overload data, and a little bit like this event today, and you getting in touch with me. So it really does. Action really does trump everything at times like this, as long as you're listening along the way. I do just want to end with 3 comments about why it pays to be human. We would call ourselves a digital agency. We respect the human capital is expensive, and we're moving towards very more automated ways of working. But I just want to reflect on 3 things, which you may not believe, but I feel passionately about. The first one is that I still believe that human interactions, albeit enabled by technology, carry the biggest punch. So this is Macca's. In some parts of Australia, over 75% of customers walking through the door using these, and often actually ordering much larger portions because they don't have to speak out the size of those portions. And it's made a big difference. But for more enlightened Macca's franchisee owners, there are nearly 1,000 of them, mostly quite rich in Australia and quite a few in New Zealand. This is also Macca's. So I dare not go backwards, but this is also Macca's, because what that last slide has enabled is a focus on table service, on hospitality, and hospitality raises NPS scores. Hospitality creates repeat visits, and so it has been worth for McDonald's franchisees, who are very cautious about what they spend on their young staff, to think about academies and different ways of working. First thing. Secondly, trust. Trust has come up time and time again, Ben. I've been reminded again and again that intention really matters when it comes to trust. I'm just going to go back to David Meister again, who wrote a great book on trust, and bringing back McDonald's. There are a lot of things. There's a list at the back of that book, How to Build Trust, written in 1992 and still relevant, by David Meister, about how to build trust, the trusted advisor. Being proactive, remember things and play them back. Ask lots of questions, go the extra mile, and fit in with the way the customer likes to do things. In a B2C environment, not just a B2B environment, data and technology can do a lot of those things extremely well and do it very gracefully and make a difference. And we've seen that with our large enterprise clients. But there's a whole bunch of other things that we need to take charge of ourselves and that relate back to purpose and intention. And someone was talking about younger people coming into organisation. They expect us to have clear purpose and clear intention as well. Noting feelings, opening ourselves up, taking personal risks and telling the truth always. We've got an old adage in our business that says, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. But it's not true. So I just reflect that I think we're living in an age where purpose and intention becomes so important for the staff we hire, but also for ourselves as well. And the last one, and I felt it in the room today, it's been fantastic actually, thank you guys, is that there is absolutely no substitute for passion. And at times like this, as I've been reminded at the beginning of the presentation, it can slide away a little bit. I spent a lot of the last 3 years in Australia helping set up Track in Australia, and it was a tough ask. None of our colleagues in Australia really wanted a New Zealander who was born in Britain to come and tell them how to set up an office called Track. And it was a tough old time. And I was sitting in Boston in a classroom in Harvard, and this guy, a guy called Luis Herte, he looks scary, but he's a lovely guy from Barcelona, just chalked up on a whiteboard these words as I was reflecting on the last 3 years. The more you feel, the more you will influence other people. And at that moment, the penny dropped, and I realised I have to go back to loving this business or get out of this business. In the end, I came back to spend more time here in New Zealand and focus on the business here and reach out to Australia that way and discovered that. But it is so true. It's very true from a lot of the people speaking. You really do have to feel in order to influence, as well as a lot of other things. So those are my reflections. In terms of the lessons about New Zealanders, please do engage with the survey if you find it interesting. And thank you for having me here, because I've learned a hell of a lot as well. Thank you.
All right, so for the final session in the morning, we'll now get a bit of a panel going. So along with Robert, we'll also have Greg back up, Andrew Seddon and Sven. See you coming up.
Oh.
Everybody's leaving, right? The office. Not
Cool.
yet.
We'll do that one.
Thanks.
Perfect. I guess we'll just stand. Can we all stand? All good? Yep.
Yeah.
Been sitting for a while. Cool. So I guess just to begin with, I might just ask a couple of questions, but I really want to ask you guys to have a think about what's important to you, what's been on your mind throughout the session, and we'll start to direct some questions around the room. But maybe just, Andrew, to start with you. I mean, when you look at your corporate and your enterprise clients and really just how they've managed large sales teams, changes in business strategy affecting a huge volume of reps, how are they managing this? How are they dealing with it?
So we've had a number of customers approach us. I don't think this thing is on.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Now that sounds better. So we had a number of customers and prospects approach us with exactly that same question. What do we do now? Where do we start? Panic, fear sets in. So the way we approach it is quite simply, when you think about what makes up a peak performing sales function, whether it's pre-COVID, post-COVID, right here, right now, there are four key pillars that you need to focus on. And we diagnose typically a sales function or a company around those four key pillars. And that highlights which of those elements that make up those four key pillars do you need to focus on first. But if you think about strategy is one of the four pillars, sales strategy in DNA, we call it, it's very important. The first thing that you start with is the business had to, a lot of people call it pivot. I'm now starting to dislike that term. I'm talking about, you're talking about rephrasing, you're talking about recrafting the way that your business now needs to go. So what do you do first? You need to be absolutely clear as a sales leader, what is that current now business strategy? Which way is the business wanting to go? If we're going this way, we now have to go that way. What's the impact on my sales strategy? And what we're finding with a lot of businesses, even pre-COVID, is that there's a disconnect between the functional strategies of sales as a function, versus the business strategies. The business wants to go that way, sales is stuck in the old ways of selling, in the old ways of compensating people, in the old ways of engaging with customers. So that's the very first step. Mm-hmm. This diagnostic that we provide highlights that by far, and it comes out all the time. But there's other elements as well that this diagnostic has now bringing up to the front is how do you compensate your people? What are the competencies and capabilities of your people in sales, including sales leaders, that you now need today and going forward? Again, we have a diagnostic tool for that. We sit down with our customers and we agree on what those capabilities and competencies need to be in this day and age going forward. And then we have people assess themselves against those competencies. That then leads to learning and development. What do you now need to put in place to train your people? Because let's be clear, the competencies and capabilities of people have changed in this current day and in this environment, particularly around your active listening. You need to be able to empathize authentically with your customers and help, rather than I'm here to sell you a widget. That's a total change in approach. So we can help, and we are helping a lot of customers with that right now.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, what do you see as, you talk about those competencies that are kind of coming to the fore in this sort of moment. I mean, what are those competencies as a broad brush trend that you're seeing coming through now?
Well, like I highlighted, the fact is that a lot of the buyers out there that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, that they're in fear themselves. They're fearful for their jobs, fearful for the businesses that they're in. So if you cannot authentically empathize with that and ask what is it that we can do to help you and in your day-to-day or what's going on in your life right now, you're going to miss the mark. You're going to miss the mark. So that's just one example. The fact that previously, let's say, face-to-face salespeople, individuals and sales leaders were able to do 5 calls in a day, now through VC, as in video conferencing, they need to do a lot more, and they can do it, should be able to do a lot more. How do you enable them to do that? How do you make sure that they actually deliver on that from an activity management perspective?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a lot of dimensions that you need to take into account when you go into this new normal, excuse the expression. How do you phrase, how do you realign your sales function to meet with what the customers are feeling out there right now?
Absolutely, that makes sense. I mean, I might just ask, just in the remaining sort of 10 or so minutes, does anyone have any questions they'd like to direct to a specific member of the panel? We can pass the microphone around, or you're happy to yell it out if you wish. Yeah.
Dr. Hansen, how do you think that as sales leaders we can impact culture for our teams, say in this remote learning environment when sometimes we call our salespeople peacocks, right? They like that to be seen, to be doing their thing, to be popular, and then how can we impact culture when they're in a remote environment? They're not necessarily in front of everybody to show off their plumage, so to speak, right? So how can we sort of impact those types of things?
For that particular sales person, you need to stroke their feathers.
All right, that's then.
I mean, we're different though, and I think it's one of the big themes that many of our clients are wrestling with worldwide is how do you stay connected, not just as sales leaders. A couple of things. I think keep your calls short, out of respect for you. As a number of you have said, people are just on calls sometimes all day with no breaks. Keep calls short and reinforce the need for that rest and recovery cycle. Every meeting needs a 10-minute, and I got seriously attacked by a local client close by on this because I recommended that every single one of their people should take 10 minutes between calls. And they said, can't afford to. I said, well, you can't afford not to. Here's the science. It's crystal clear. So I think, allowing the recovery phase would be key. The second piece, use the telephone. Telephone is sometimes better than a call. People connect with just the tone of voice. If you want to build trust quickly, because unfortunately these video calls still have lags, and they break the trust cycles in your empathy circuits. So it's a quick, what is he trying to say there? Or, is he telling the truth? There's a lot of doubt in a virtual call. On a telephone call, that doubt is gone. So I would connect with your people every day, short, respectful calls, but really be willing to listen and then work out. You will have some peacocks, stroke the feathers, but there are others who need bonuses. They want achievement. There are others who want to get excited about something. They want to hear stories, and there are others who want to see the numbers. So you play to what their needs are. Salespeople are different too.
Perfect, thanks. Hey, anyone else got any burning questions to throw out? Yes, go for it. Go on.
Yeah, where do you think the balance lies? Like we talked about being human, we talked about moving to a screen-to-screen situation for selling, we talked about using old school phone, which I totally agree with, rather than Zoom. But you know, we've got a situation where as salespeople, you have your sales teams, they thrive in a human connection. Like the first thing I did out of after lockdown was go and visit some customers and just having that connection again. And I know that's what our team did. But finding that balance between having that connection and being, you know, fulfilling your human need, so to speak, as to the efficiency of getting through what you need to do, and now you can actually achieve more in this screen environment. Where do you see the balance sitting in that?
Over to anyone. Yeah.
If I can start, it depends on your customer. So you start with the customer because some customers are now working from home 2-3 days a week. So you have to adjust and yourself in terms of how you engage with them. Those customers are much more open now to those video conferencing type engagements or phone calls as they're more than they were before. And the analogy I quite often use is that if you think about countries like the US or big geographical areas, they are used to having video conferencing conversations with their prospects, with their customers. We're not, because we're so small and we can have these social interactions. But I hope I answer your question by saying, look at the customer, start from the customer's perspective. How do they want to engage? They've changed, or they want to see face-to-face. Great. I prefer face-to-face. Gives you energy, etc., and it came out in your presentation as well. So, you know, it depends on the customer.
Rob, did you have something?
I just kind of add to that. I feel that as an agency, we agencies are meant to be exciting places to be, like, you know, and all the rest of it. But yet we made an assumption that everyone should be back, and we want to be back, we want to do that. And we weren't actually nearly as flexible as our clients. And we started just warmly welcoming our clients back in. And some of our clients, and I mentioned Vodafone, very, very clearly said, well, I'm going to work on these days at home. Others were have been more enlightened than us around some of the working from home practices. And others had quite strict policies. So this big warm people welcome thing didn't actually work for everyone. And we didn't ask the question. So I'd also say that whilst I prefer face-to-face contact as well, you can probably tell, we've been in, you know, a lot of organisations, we've been in a reset right now, reset towards the second half, and there's been this nostalgia for the lockdown days, but not just for being at home, but also this sense that actually, Rob, during that time of lockdown, we weren't just more efficient. We actually solved problems a lot faster on those calls, and we're not doing that quite enough today. How can we get that back? So, yes, I do think there are some things that have not been great about that calls. The ability to pull people together and just make decisions faster. We've lost a bit of that, so I want to get that back. So I think ask your people and ask your clients. And as I said, we made too many assumptions that we were going to be this big social hub for our clients, and we were a bit surprised when some of them didn't want it.
Just one thing that I noticed as well is the assumption side of things is understanding your staff as well. So 100% understanding your customers, but understanding your staff. We have salespeople that are really extroverted and loud and boisterous, and we have people that are quite withdrawn and more creative internally. It was really interesting to see that the extroverted people really enjoyed downtime at home, and it harks back to what you're saying, Sven, about recovery and things like this, and not always being that loud person that's sort of talking and taking the limelight the whole time. So understanding your staff as well and giving them the opportunity to use that time as well.
Absolutely. And we might just take one final question before we wrap for the morning. Anyone got one other that would like to ask?
I just had a quick question for Sven, and maybe it's a but answer if you like. Sven, you talked about the rapid bounce thing. So trying to get that up further into your team thing, because I think a lot of my team are on that kind of low that you talked about. Have you seen anything particularly effective that have been done? I know there's individual stuff, but have you seen anything particularly effective to kind of reset that team and get bouncing back up as a team and changing the mind? And then Greg, I just had one question for you, which is, as a kind of a business owner, kind of that focus, has anything really resonated with business sales and talk to you that's resonated, like, so getting you interested during post-lockdown?
So what was that? Sorry, just to clarify.
Just I guess kind of what's kind of worked for you as someone coming towards you and making you go, actually, that's a good idea. I want to pursue that and invest time there.
Yeah, sure.
So there are two questions. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I think, look, it's a big question.
Yeah.
A couple of quick ones. You need to know who your EAP is or where your people can get help.
Yep.
And I think as sales leaders, you don't want to spend too much time as a therapist.
Okay.
Your job is to say, look, I understand you're having a tough time. Here's some help. Really help me. Maybe a doctor, whatever. So know your EAP. Second thing, socialize it. Name the elephant in the room. So it means on calls, try and develop a routine, and I've really seen this work beautifully with our customers and people who take on board. Never start with the agenda. Start with the people on the call. How are you doing? Listen, and almost train them to talk about what they're doing physically, something about maybe their activities over the weekend, how they're feeling this week, what are they thinking about? So name the body, emotion, mind stuff. And as that dialogue starts, I think people call for help and they recognize that the most dangerous things you go down and you don't see it. Right? And that's dangerous for you as leader as well as for the individual in that spot.
Great.
Once people acknowledge it, they bounce real fast. Have faith. So we say to people, insight is 50% of the problem solved. The danger is when people don't see it.
Great stuff.
For me, I guess the things that have struck me the most is I've probably learnt a lot personally as well during this period, and so understanding that extroverts need that time and those sort of things are fine, but also just stopping and accepting what other people are saying and the power of the group. I know it's a little cliche sometimes, but those calls that we had with all the team on at once and people putting their ideas forward that weren't doing it before, giving people a platform or a chance to be able to express themselves and understand how to do that, and letting those guys, the group, create the ideas is probably one of the biggest things that I've seen and learnt and now need to trust in to make sure those things come through.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Well, just in closing, let's just give everyone who spoke today a massive hand. That was fantastic. Thank you all for coming. I learned a lot from today. I hope you all did as well. We'll be hanging around afterwards, so feel free to come up and introduce yourselves or to catch up if we haven't seen you for some time. I know a lot of the other speakers will be hanging around to say hi as well. So yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for coming. We hope to see you at the next one. Have a great day.
Good.